The Data Collectors. Written by Danielle Palli. Narrated by Graham Mack and Danielle Palli.
28. The Rescue. Now. 5 years after the assembly. "Let me come with you," Roman implored. He wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his ruffled shirt and stood. "I've spent several years researching the data collectors, the IPP and Terra. I probably know more about how the Royals operate than anyone." "Then you'll know how powerful they are," Tanager reasoned. As the group prepared to leave, Fatima quickly scooped Bagheera up. He protested as she placed him abruptly back in her carpet bag.
"Sorry, kitty,"
she apologized, zipping it enough to prevent his escape and hanging it on her arm.
"Hey,"
she called to the team, who were already following Tanager's lead out the door.
"don't you think we need to do something about that first?"
She pushed the door to Roman's bedroom open, where his flowchart of images and information were clearly visible. Ivan swallowed with some difficulty, bothered both by what he saw and that Fatima clearly knew what was behind the bedroom door. He pushed that out of his mind for the time being. "Not to worry, my fair Fatima." Roman was restored to his old bravado. "I've had to relocate quickly before." He ran into the room, took a long rope at the edge of the diagram in hand, and pulled. The team watched with interest. 3 seconds later, the entire diagram was up in flames. "Let's go," he instructed, taking Fatima by the arm and motioning others toward the door.
"But fire?"
Fatima protested. "Flame retardant walls. It will cause a lot of smoke and may cause someone to call the fire department, but it will fizzle out in a few minutes. I disabled the smoke alarms in here for that reason. But we need to leave. Now." With that, Tanager ran out of the room with the team close at his heels, as they made their way out the door and down the back staircase leading outside. "Respectfully," Tanager pulled Roman and Ivan aside, "I suggest you use your knowledge to assist Ivan." Ivan's ears perked up at the mention of his name. "Aye," he answered. "The vessel." "Exactly," Tanager nodded, reaching his car, which was parked down a side lane behind the mongrel, its front tires on the curb and its back end hanging precariously in the street. "We need to prepare to head out as soon as Cepheus and I retrieve Lucene." To Fatima he advised, "You should go home. You'll be safer there."
"What home?"
Fatima snorted, unwilling to be dismissed.
"I've been led to believe that I no longer have one."
Tanager looked surprised. "What do you mean? What happened?" "The Royals happened," Ivan grumbled, still not entirely sure who they were. "They blew up their home and mine." Ivan rested a hand on Fatima's shoulder. "Perhaps you'd be safer with us." Tanager nodded. "But be careful. If you see anything suspicious, run. Between the IPP, the military, and the Royals, I have no idea who might try to intercept you." Had Tanager known that nearly all of the IPP members, minus Drake Cushing, had been killed in an explosion in the part of the casino that no one even knew existed, he may have felt a slightly less sense of urgency, but only slight.
"At the very least, I can stand guard,"
Fatima offered as she, Roman, and Ivan headed toward the mongrel. She followed Ivan's lead as he motioned for them to climb in the back and strap themselves in. As Cepheus got in along Tanager in their little blue car, a few pedestrians stopped to gape at his appearance. He pulled his hood a little further over his face before they remembered that it was impolite to stare. "Are you certain you are ready for this, my friend?" Tanager was concerned. "Yes. It's time I faced them." "Where are we headed?" Roman asked after they'd driven out of town and were now venturing down several overgrown and isolated streets in the middle of nowhere. "To a preserve," Ivan began. "Never mind. Don't say it aloud," Roman admonished, hastily. "Can't be sure who's listening." Under normal circumstances, Fatima would have assumed it was part of Roman's delusions. But now there was a possibility that he was right. Ivan continued down one path after another, moving further and further from civilization. Roman wasn't even sure if where Ivan was driving was technically roads. But the mongrels seemed to pass over the terrain with ease. It may have been his imagination, but he could have sworn the truck was adjusting in height and width so that its body remained just above any water and tall grass, and slipped easily between cypress trees. "We're here," Ivan finally said as he managed to park his vehicle at the centre of the marsh where they now sat. He reached under his seat and pulled out knee-high rubber hip boots. "Check under your seats, you've got some too." Sure enough, under each seat was a pair of one-size-fits-all boots.
Why do you have so many of these in your car?
Fatima wanted to know. "Used to run eco-tourism trips some time ago," he explained.
Really?
Fatima was surprised.
You've been my neighbor for practically forever. How did I not know this?
"There's lots you don't know about me," he answered seriously. Opening the driver's seat door, he hung one foot out at a time as he slipped them into the boots before sloshing his way calf-deep in water toward the back. "There's just one problem about the current situation," he said.
Only one?
Fatima chortled. "What's the problem?" Roman asked. "These royals, whoever they may be, blew up me lab. We'll have to get by with the tools I've got here." He opened the double doors where Roman and Fatima were stationed. They'd unfastened their seatbelts and were already hastily pulling on spare boots that they'd found under the seats. It was a choice between those and flippers, and the boots seemed more appropriate. "Anything else we can use to help us?" Roman inquired. "Well, I've got this 3D printed micro car repair kit that might be useful." Cepheus and Tanager drove toward the docks. "I was just here," Tanager lamented. "Was it my fault? Did you have to come after me because of an episode?" Cepheus felt ashamed. "Not exactly. Do you remember having an episode?" "I remember not being myself and then something bringing me back. Perhaps if I had not gone away, you would have found her sooner." "I'm certain it would have made no difference. After all, it was you who located her. And I don't have your powers of reception," Tanager offered graciously. Once they arrived, Tanager stopped their vehicle. He and Cepheus jumped out, not bothering to confirm that it was in park or that the engine had been turned off. The two headed toward the abandoned warehouse at the end of the marina. "When I heard the royals, they hadn't located Lucene yet," Tanager continued. "I can't say what happened between the time I left and now, but I know for certain that I wouldn't have been equipped to face them without your help." Cepheus detected movement and signaled Tanager to be quiet. On the building's ground level, demolished soot and stone lay all around them with broken wooden beams and debris. A single light bulb cast a dim shadow over the area, doing little to help with visibility. The warehouse appeared empty this time around. Cepheus paused for a moment to listen.
Might want to try the roof,
A voice called from beneath the docks. Odessa swam up to one of the nearby pilings.
but you didn't hear it from me.
"Thank you." Tanager seemed surprised at her continued support, given her resolve to never interfere.
Don't thank me.
Odessa called before swimming off.
I don't want to see Earth destroyed. It's my home, too.
With that, she made a swan-like dive and vanished beneath the water. Tanager turned to find Cepheus already scaling the walls of the warehouse like a brown anole. He realized that he'd have to find another way up. Running back inside, he scoured the ground floor until he found an old stairwell. As quickly as he could, he began the long climb to the roof, cursing the fact that he hadn't spent more time on the treadmill. Preferring to travel the old-fashioned way, the Royal's vessel sat on the roof in preparation for its launch into space. To the common observer, however, it would not appear to be a spacecraft they witnessed before them, but a rooftop green space, A small green patch of grass protruded from the metal rooftop, which, when viewed from a distance, appeared to be no more than an environmentally friendly mound. The irony was not lost on Cepheus, who leapt gracefully from the ledge onto the roof. The irony, of course, was that the royals would risk destroying all of Earth's natural resources in order to take control. Hamish sensed his arrival before he saw him.
"Cepheus,"
Hamish said, instinctively aware that the Anole had slipped beside him. Hamish stood overlooking the horizon, clad in a three-piece grey suit, with a blood-red tie and black patent leather shoes, looking as human as possible. In the back of his mind, Cepheus wondered exactly who they planned to meet, since they were planning their departure from Earth and the garments were completely unsuitable for travel. Were they stopping somewhere along the way? Just behind him, Sabrina stood, regally decked out in a bright red sequin dress and heels with long matching coloured fingernails. On her wrist, she wore a large round watch.
"Fredo, you've got 2 minutes to get here or we leave without you.
She screamed into the watch's receiver.
And you can rot on this mangy planet. Cepheus,"
she acknowledged, turning her attention to the caped man before her. She pinched his face in her hands to get a closer look.
"Finally."
He rested the urge to snap her fingers, choosing instead to gently break his oblong face free from her eagle-like grasp.
"But you're too late to help us now. We've already got the girl. You're useless to us."
Hamish opened his mouth to protest, looking at his son sheepishly. At that moment, Fredo emerged from the stairwell, dragging Tanager behind him like a rag doll. "Found this in the stairwell," he grunted, tossing Tanager to the ground before crossing his tree-trunk arms in front of him, exposing the talons on each hand. Animal-like scratch marks were visible across Tanager's neck and face. Cepheus went to rescue his friend, but Hamish stopped him.
"You're too late. There's nothing you can do once the poison has reached his heart, which, by the look of it, already has."
Tanager's complexion turned a sallow yellow as the veins in his neck gradually became an intense blue. His eyes began to glaze over.
"What are you?
Sabrina asked the crumpled man on the ground.
An earth-loving peacekeeper?"
Then her eyes grew wide in recognition.
"Wait, don't tell me this is Tanager, the other famous foundling responsible for training the precious data collectors. Some leader you were.
She spat on the ground beside him.
"Fredo, let's go."
She weighted her foot alongside the green patch and reached her hand down as if to grab a handful of grass. Instead, her fingers wrapped around a lever. She lifted back the hatch and began to descend into the craft with Tanager's assailant at her heels, like an overgrown puppy.
"Finish this, Hamish,"
she commanded.
"or I will."
"You have to let Lucene go," Cepheus told his father, calmly as soon as his mother and Fredo had gone. He fought back all emotions and came from a hollow space where feelings refused to live.
"I'm afraid it's not entirely up to me, son. You know as well as I do that I'm just a figurehead, and that neither of us has the power that Sabrina seems to think we do. We answer to a higher source, and that source thinks that that girl is very important to us."
Cepheus nodded for a moment, gazing off into the distance. He wasn't planning his next move. He was just tuning in. It was then that he realized Lucene was already on board, and they were ready to depart. "Then you leave me no choice." Cepheus grabbed his father by the collar with both hands and attempted to hoist him off the roof and into the water below. His father fell haphazardly over the ledge before his instincts kicked in, and he caught himself on the wall with suction-like hands, his feet scrambling to kick off his shoes to afford him a better grip. Cepheus lost no time. He deftly climbed into the ship's hatch, setting the lift to descend at full speed once inside. Anticipating another battle below, he knew his father would survive the fall, but hadn't expected him to recover so quickly. Unfortunately for him, he didn't have it in his heart to kill, even now. Equally unfortunate is that his parents had no such qualms. As expected, Fredo pulled him from the lift before it touched the floor. With a tremendous swing of his arm, the bodyguard tossed Cepheus violently into a metal wall, recoiled his arm, and moved to strike a second time. Cepheus dragged himself to his feet, sidestepping the attack, and planted a blow to the side of the salamander's absurdly large head. Fredo barely flinched. He swung his battering ram arm wildly, knocking Cepheus to the ground. His target's head slammed against the wall for a second time. Using what little training he could remember, Cepheus swept his legs across Fredo's knees, toppling the soldier. The red salamander landed face first on the ground, with his arms in front of him, bracing his fall, artfully ending up in what could be described as the push-up position, a skill he'd learned in the military for following up a fall to avoid broken knees and ankles. Fredo leapt to his feet with a triumphant smile in time to see that Cepheus was gone. He'd already made his way to the bridge. "Lucene, where are you?" he called, now close enough to be within earshot. There was a muffled cry down the hall. He followed it, finding Lucene still strapped to a gurney and Sabrina pressing her hands across her mouth to stifle her scream. Even with limited mobility, Lucene had one remaining option. She bit. Hard. Sabrina let out a scream.
"You little—"
Her poison-tipped fingernails descended as she prepared to lash Lucene's throat. Cepheus grabbed her arm and dislocated it in one move. Sabrina wailed in pain and paused to relocate it as Fredo grabbed Cepheus from behind in a bear hug. As Cepheus struggled, he pushed his feet off the gurney, which toppled sideways, taking a strapped-in Lucene with it. The side of her face hit the cool surface of the floor, sending pain shooting through her skull. There she remained, lying sideways, hanging painfully off the gurney from the shackles that bound her to it. Fredo's grip across Cepheus's chest grew tighter, and the wiry man struggled to breathe. His knees weakened as he became increasingly lightheaded. Fredo tossed the man back and forth, his legs flopping like a fish out of water, making it impossible for him to even kick his assailant in self-defense. Cepheus finally stopped struggling, both to catch his breath and to hopefully gain his freedom. Suddenly Fredo stopped, loosening his grip on Cepheus, who fell in a heap to the floor, gratefully swallowing the air around him. A trickle of blood dribbled from Fredo's mouth as he landed with thud on top of Cepheus. Once again, Cepheus, his frail-looking frame beaten, had gotten the wind knocked out of him. He squirmed out from under the massive Fredo. It was only then he noticed an oversized fingernail protruding from Fredo's back. Hamish, in full reptilian form, stood solemnly at the beast's feet, sucking at his bloody finger. His suit tattered around him, and his tail swung in agitation from side to side.
"What have you done? What have you done?"
Sabrina clasped her injured arm. She fell to her knees, sobbing over Fredo's body. Hamish stepped around them, removing a key from his jacket pocket and unlatching the shackles from Lucene's arms, legs and chest. He helped her slowly to her feet, trying not to bleed on her. She held onto his arm for support. Cepheus struggled to his feet and rushed to her side, eyeing his father questioningly.
"I'm sorry, my son. I was angry and felt betrayed when you left us. But what we did to you," he said, looking into Cepheus's yellow eyes and seeing a man perpetually stuck between the transformation of being half human and half lizard, one demolished by the loss of his family.
"There is no excuse for what we did to you."
"You idiot!"
screamed Sabrina, still sobbing over her lost Fredo. She raised her good arm and barked into her watch.
"Emergency backup needed immediately. No restraint."
Hamish grabbed Sabrina's arm with one hand. He wrapped the other around her neck and shoved her into the wall.
"Hush, my darling."
To Cepheus he admonished,
"Best to go now, my son."
Cepheus bowed his head slightly and guided Lucene back to the lift. He heard a loud choking noise, followed by silence. Hamish was saying something to those on the other end of the receiver, something to the effect of,
"False alarm. Stand down."
but he couldn't be sure. He didn't look back. At the surface, Lucene spotted the tall blue figure of a woman with yarn-like hair standing over Tanager's body.
No!
She cried, breaking free from Cepheus's grasp and running over to kneel beside Tanager.
"He appears to be dead,"
Morphanai pronounced, without feeling. Having grown tired of his male butterfly forms, Morphanai had now transmuted into a female figure.
You're the blue butterfly Mr. Sparks talks about.
Lucene wiped back tears. It was a statement, not a question.
"Yes."
Morphanai cocked his head to one side curiously.
Can you save him?
Lucene asked.
"Perhaps."
Morphanai regarded Tanager as if weighing the possibility.
"But I don't understand why you need me."
Will you help us? Cepheus knelt on one knee and wrapped a protective arm around Lucene. She's not ready yet, and I'm not powerful enough.
I can only retain balance, and balance here appears to have been restored.
The way you restored balance when you saved a young boy's life once? A boy who would not come to deserve it?
Lucene spouted angrily, her eyes red from tears. Morphanai was taken aback and felt a pang of something. What was it? Guilt?
"Be careful," Cepheus warned.
But Lucene could not be silenced.
A boy whose influence led to thousands of people being killed, and a world that is now in danger of being destroyed, repurposed, and repopulated out of greed? That same boy whose actions invariably led to a very well-meaning and kind man laying dead at our feet? If you do not save this man, you have upset the balance. The universe needs more of the loving kindness that this man has to offer.
The gnawing in Morphanai's stomach grew stronger. It was a rare feeling indeed. Morphanai relented. Leaning over Tanager's stiff body, she touched a hand to his heart. His body jumped as if receiving a jolt from a defibrillator, and returned to stillness. Morphanai tried again. Once again his body jumped, but nothing more.
"We are too late," Cepheus mourned.
He began twitching as his eyes began to roll back into his head.
No, no, no,
Lucene commanded.
Stay with me, Cepheus. You have to help me.
He hugged her shoulders tighter and nodded, pulling himself back into the present.
I refuse to believe that we're too late.
Lucene touched a hand to Tanager's heart.
Once more, please.
"Okay," Morphanai obliged, putting her hand on top of Lucene's instinctively. Cepheus did the same.
Come back to us,
Lucene implored. She felt energy flow through her arms like a gentle wave of water, magnified by the combined intentions and energy of those around her. The branch-like strands of lightning that decorated her arms began to glow. Tanager gasped for breath and colour flooded his face. His chest heaved as he sucked in oxygen. Without thinking, Lucene grabbed his hand in hers and held on tightly. Tanager turned his gaze toward hers and joked. "Well, she certainly is a charmer, isn't she?"
Oh. Oh no.
Lucene sniffed back, playing along.
I don't practice magic, only science.
She leaned over and pressed her forehead to his for a moment before catching herself and backing away. Tanager raised his gaze toward Morphanai. "Thank you, my friend."
"You don't need to thank me," Morphanai responded coldly. "I am here only to restore and maintain balance. Nothing more.
I don't have any friends." "Understood," Tanager acquiesced. "But should your position on such things change in the near future, we're here for you, and indebted to you." Morphanai nodded awkwardly, before rising up in the air as if attached to strings. Suddenly her wings unfolded as she transformed herself into a little blue butterfly and fluttered away. Cepheus helped Tanager to his feet. We must go. Quickly. The three helped each other to the stairwell, as if they were a house of cards, each holding the other up. They made a less than quick descent, but finally reached the docks.
You three look worse than a dried-up horseshoe crab on the beach after mating season.
Odessa wrapped her arms around one of the dock's pilings and swished her tail back and forth playfully, enjoying the show.
Wonderful being insulted by a talking ship's figurehead,
Lucene retorted. Just 1 month prior, she might have been taken aback at Odessa's mermaid-like appearance, but little surprised her these days. We might owe Odessa our gratitude for sending reinforcements, Tanager responded gracefully. The three moved as quickly as a water turtle toward their car.
You mean Morph and I? Nah, I had nothing to do with that.
Odessa swam alongside them.
My job is only to report my findings to the Vitruvians. What they do with that information is entirely up to them.
Of course, Tanager acknowledged, but did not stop.
If you're heading out now, I might suggest an alternate form of transportation.
The three stopped. What do you mean? Cepheus asked quietly.
You three are already a spectacle. Driving around in that easily identifiable car with angry royals and the people they betrayed nipping at your heels might not be the way to go.
What do you suggest? Cepheus leaned in quietly, ignoring Odessa's obvious attempt to flash her breasts at him for attention. She did a few backstrokes with her upper torso glistening under a strategically placed dock light.
You might consider traveling by sea instead of land. I can't help you, of course. That would be interfering. However, if you happen to follow me without my knowing, well, that cannot be helped now, can it?
How is it you know where we're going? Tanager asked suspiciously.
I know everything.
She winked at him.
For example, if you happen to take that boat over there, how can I stop you? It doesn't appear to be in use at the moment. Cops have gone home for the evening, and I don't expect them back until first light.
Tanager lengthened his frame, standing tall with renewed energy. Excellent! Then he turned to Cepheus and Lucene, still wearing his ridiculous fishing outfit. Do either of you know how to sail a boat?
I can manage. Let's say we follow the mermaid without her knowing it.
Odessa splashed beside them, annoyed.
I'm not a mermaid,
she complained, letting out a sigh.
Off I go, unaware.
Hamish stepped back over his wife's body, then Fredo's, with a surprising lack of feeling. He would figure out an excuse and how to dispose of the bodies later. For now, he knew it was time to leave. Suddenly something grabbed at his ankle. He looked down to see Fredo staring up at him with wide black eyes. Hamish was just about to take his other heel and drive it into the salamander's face. "Wait!" Fredo gasped. "My sovereign!" Hamish paused. It was the first time Fredo had addressed him as such, where he felt he actually meant it. It sounded almost like respect.
What do you have to say to me?
Hamish's tired face dropped into a deeper grimace.
I understand if you want to kill me. Well, then we're agreed on something.
He lifted his foot.
The baby!
He grasped, coughing up blood.
What baby?
Hamish's eyes suddenly grew wide.
You mean Sabrina was pregnant?
Yes, Fredo whispered. Hamish turned to look at his wife's lifeless body on the floor.
How is it that you knew this before me?
Terror crossed the salamander's face.
It's not my baby, is it?
He pressed his heel into Fredo's throat.
Is it?
That explains Sabrina's urgency to make a baby, Hamish thought to himself. It was just a cover.
No,
Fredo choked, defeated. He knew there was no chance of saving the child now. His child. It was his first and only feeling of humanity, and an emotion that felt like sorrow crept into his soul. Hamish's first instinct was to leave them both, and the baby, to die. His thoughts returned to Cepheus, She had taken him from them. It was her fault. Now there were no heirs to take his place. Unless... Hamish picked up the receiver again.
Disregard previous orders, he feigned panic. Send medical and military aid immediately. My dear Sabrina and I have just been attacked. So has my royal guard.
He leaned over Fredo's body.
Now,
he grit his teeth,
if you want me to let you live, you need to hurt me enough to be convincing. Go ahead, take a swipe at me.
Fredo, his blood spilling out over the floor and beginning to lose consciousness, obeyed, raising an arm weakly. Hamish had to lean in so Fredo could reach. The salamander took a large swipe across Hamish's face. The royal let out a yelp as blood trickled from his left eye. Backup could be heard from the spacecraft's upper level as aid rushed to descend to their station. Moments before they arrived, Hamish gave one last order to Fredo.
You are never to speak of this incident ever again.